Well, you're welcome.
Recording is on.
It's good to be here.
Thank you. So before we start, maybe you can explain something about yourself.
Yeah, well, I guess what they call an industry veteran. I worked almost 50 years in shipping. The past 10 years concentrating on climate and environmental issues. I've worked for two of the largest Danish shipping companies, but also been active with IMO and the EU and various ship owning organizations.
Wow.
Really, climate and environment is what makes me tick.
Well, that's an impressive resume, and then I think our ticks are aligned in that sense. Yeah, good, great to hear. And you have something to say about the Fuel EU initiative.
Well, the Fuel EU is one of the several pieces of legislation as part of the Fit for 55 package that the EU Commission came out with last year. And it's, to me, it's quite a major step forward when it comes to reporting data and the whole system backup that the maritime world needs. Unfortunately, it's also slightly different in its structure to many of the other reporting requirements that the shipping industry has. So although it's only going to be active and implemented in a couple of years' time, the industry really needs to prepare for this, and it's going to take quite a while. It looks very complicated to me. You have to say, of course, that it's still a proposal. It's a commission proposal. The parliament has made some initial comments to it. Where exactly it will end, we do not know. But it's going to be there or thereabouts of what the commission is proposing, and that's serious business.
But when would it be implemented?
Well, the first year when you have to meet the new targets looks to be 2026.
Okay.
But the whole reporting documentation has to be ready and approved before that. Yep. And it's, as I said, it's quite complex, and it requires not only new systems, but also new working procedures, and perhaps even new kinds of documentation that you need to have on record.
And that's for class or for new builds, or?
But this is for everybody that will call an EU port or an EEA port. So it's basically the same scope as the current MRV legislation.
Right.
When it comes to geography. But when it comes to measuring, it's a lot more detailed. First of all, it's more than CO2. It's more greenhouse gases. It's methane, it's nitrous oxide, and the parliament is even suggesting that black carbon is included.
Okay.
So that's one major change. The other major change is that it includes the upstream element. So we are talking a well-to-wake figure.
Oh, whoa.
And that in itself is a major challenge to get that data.
Exactly. That's quite hard to get in the first place.
Well, I think the Commission will provide a table of standard values that you can use. But if you use standard values, you have really no tools for optimization.
No.
And if you really want to do the best here, you have to work on all the parameters. Also, the reduction, there will be a fixed reduction figure over time, increasing over time. And that reduction figure is on the total amount, so on the well-to-wake emission. And if you can only kind of manipulate your working procedures on the tank-to-wake, the reduction in that element has to be much bigger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course.
So it really looks tricky.
So how come nobody knows, or almost nobody knows about these? Because I haven't heard of many people talking about it.
No, I mean, as I mentioned, it's mentioned in the Fit for 55 package.
Yeah.
But I think the industry has more than enough on its table at the moment with the IMO regulations that's coming up, the EXI, the CII, and the ETS in Europe.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
in
of
itself
course.
is a major task that the industry needs to prepare for. And they're coming first. So they're probably concentrating on that, getting that in place before looking into more detail on the Fuel EU.
Yeah.
But my advice, of course, is that people they look at this early because it's a major task.
Yeah, it is. And most of those measures or incentives or regulations, let's call them, that you mentioned just now, CII, EU ETS, part of EU MRV, or all those others, EEXI, that's already, like you say, quite a lot. For me, it's even hard to get them all proper on the mind.
Yeah.
Then you have this as well. So where does it fit? Is it something that's an extension of EU MRV, or is it on top of everything else?
Some extent, it's an extension of the EU MRV. They talk about using the 2020 MRV data to calculate the baseline. But the whole reporting system will have to be enhanced to include the other climate gases. But also more detail, you need the upstream element. The MRV data is based on a definition of a port call. The Fuel EU actually works with the definition of a berth. So if you have several berths within the same port call, suddenly you have more measuring points and more things to comply with.
Right. Okay, so it is something different entirely, you could say.
It is something different. Unlike the MRV, which of course is a reporting thing, the Fuel EU will also allow companies to pool ships.
What does that mean?
So the target that you're to meet can be for a pool of ships. So one ship can be over the target, another ships can be below the target. You pool them together, and you're within the target.
So your fleet, you can manage your fleet in a way.
Yeah, if you want to. But this whole pooling again, as a principle, is mentioned, but the details of how it's going to work is not clear yet. And how do you find a baseline in 2020 for a ship that perhaps is not in the 2020 database?
Good question.
So I still have a lot of open issues here that I would like to see some clarification on. And
does this apply to all vessels, or more like the above 5,000 gross tonnage?
Well, that's what the Commission is proposing. The reply from some of the Parliament's members is actually they go down to 400 gross tonnage.
400?
Yeah, which is the MARPOL limit. And again, then if that comes into play, then we don't have the data in 2020.
No.
And it will involve a lot more ships.
But
I don't think it stands much of a chance to go down to 400 actually. But it is being proposed by a number of the members of the EU Parliament in the amendments.
Right. That's really a game changer if that would occur, but most likely not going to happen.
I don't think so, but you never know. You never know. One has to keep an eye out for it.
Yeah. And so suppose you're a ship owner, you actually, how does that work? Who actually comes to you and says you're not complying to Fuel EU standards? Would that be governmental, or would that be class?
Well, it will need to be verified, like the MRV data is verified, and then submitted to the Commission. And if your carbon factor, your average carbon factor, is above the target, there are actually some pretty stiff penalties proposed in the Commission proposal. So very stiff.
Can you elaborate?
Well, there's a formula, and it depends on whether it's during sailing or whether it's in port. And I have a figure of 2,400 euro per. I need to look it up.
Okay, but already.
But it's significant money.
A hefty fine, not as opposed to the CII measures in which you have 3 consecutive years of you're too low, and then you need to make a report, and then nothing really is done.
Yeah, and for the CII, nothing will really happen until the review in 26.
Yeah.
Until then, it's data collection.
Right. And then for the EU ETS, it's also totally different. That's just the tax for the amount of fuel.
But that's money up front, basically. From next year, it will start costing money. And with the current price of carbon, it's going to cost a lot of money if you are above your. Well, in any case, you'd have to buy for your entire consumption. Although there is a phasing in scale on that as well.
Yeah. But that's only CO2, like you said previously. Fuel EU would also incorporate methane, NOx, so that would also be totally different measurements in a way.
Well, that's also one thing I really haven't found out yet, is exactly how you're supposed to measure this.
Yeah.
I believe the Commission will give you some standard figures, but again, if you use these, you really have no or limited opportunities for optimizing. So in the ideal world, you will be measuring this individually on a ship-by-ship basis. Yeah.
But with measurement systems like continuous emission monitoring systems in your exhaust pipes or per engine, or?
Well, to be honest, I'm not sure what the best measure is to measure these gases.
Okay.
And as if they also include black carbon, how do you actually measure the greenhouse gas effect of black carbon? And these are the details that the Commission needs to come up with from a working group and give us some guidance documents on how to do this.
When do you think we get more guidance? Would that be this year, or would that be further
I think
away?
you will need it this year. I've asked one of my contacts whether in Brussels whether they have seen or can find out what the likely timetable is for this. As I said in the start, companies need to start early. It's quite a complex set of regulations here.
Yeah. Well, that's a tricky issue. Okay. And any way to prepare for this as a ship owner?
Well, first of all, you need to understand the legislation. And although it's not finalized yet, the recommendation is start reading it, start finding out where the pitfalls are, and where you are not covered with your existing systems.
But is that all EU legislation? Where can you find that information?
Well, on the EU Commission website.
Okay.
If you know how to look for it, you'll find it in there.
Yeah, because before we started, you mentioned it was 200 pages or more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's some light reading.
It's typical legal documents.
Oh, fun to read. Oh. Okay, well, I'm definitely going to start looking into that topic and see how it all fits together. And but it's definitely something to sort of keep your eye on for the future.
Well, I hope there will be some focus groups established where the industry and the lawmakers in Brussels get together and discuss the practicalities here. Because one thing is, putting it down on paper and your wishes. Something else is implementing this in practice. And that's often a very difficult and different thing to do. So we need to be practical about this, what is actually doable, while still achieving the goals that we have to achieve.
True, because in terms of well, practical limits. We discussed it only a little bit, but it was actually one of your questions that you posed earlier on the platform. What do you think of these regulations and how do you measure it? We just hinted at it as well. I have done some NOx measurements in the past, CO2, sulfur, etc. I did some measurements, or well, not me personally, of course, but we ordered a company to do measurements for some vessels. That whole process, just one measurement, took us about half year to do, to organize, to implement, to validate, to verify, etc. That's not something you can do sort of on a practical basis per vessel.
And the volume of data that will be required to do all this makes it essential that you automate the systems.
Yeah.
There's no room for manual action here. It has to be sensor driven, online data driven.
But that's the case for MRV as well, right? Or is there manual labor involved?
You can do manually, a lot manually under the current MRV.
Okay.
But what we're asking here, different gases, a lot more measuring points, a lot more detail, and the fact that it results in a financial consequence makes it that much more important.
You need to be really strict. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for your time. I'll stop the recording now, and maybe we can discuss a little bit more on different topics that you're also doing, because I know you have a lot on your plate.
Fine. Right. You're welcome.
Thank you. Let's see.